Hello, welcome in Building and Culture. In the Series 101 book To Form a Soul, we will talk about the book of Gaston Bachelard, Water and Dreams. The book was written by Bachelard and belongs to the field of philosophy. It is composed of 8 parts. Its main theme is the imaginary of water. Other themes are matter, narcissism, death, anger, gentleness, purity, the element, femininity, the night, myths. Historical context. The work was published in France in 1942, during the occupation, which is probably not important since the author does not speak directly about these historical circumstances. However, we may wonder whether the preoccupation with death, but also with gentleness and maternal protection, does not reflect a certain anxiety for the future and whether it is not linked to the fears of the time. But these are only hypotheses. In any case, Bachelard sees himself as a materialist, and a materialist who deplores the fact that matter has been devalued to the exclusive benefit of form. Bachelard said, "It seemed to us, in particular, that the individualizing power of matter was underestimated. Why do we always attach the notion of the individual to the notion of form? Is there not an individuality in depth that makes matter, in its smallest particles, always a totality? Meditated in its perspective of depth, matter is precisely the principle that can lose interest in forms. It is not simply the deficit of a formal activity. It remains itself in spite of all deformation, all fragmentation." A materialist philosophy, then, but not dialectical materialism. It's not about thinking of the human being in an economic context that needs to be improved in one way or another. On the contrary, it's about coming to terms with the archaic form of the element as an explicator of the meaning of human life. The element chosen here is water, and this element is drawn on in all its aspects. At once calm, protective, lulling water, and at once monstrous, violent, deadly, murderous water. In a historical context where the truth of the world seems to be announced through economic success, Bachelard opposes the truth of the element. Why read this essay today? Since the discourse of the element seems detached from any historical context and the imaginary that it conveys escapes time, Freud said that the unconscious has no history. And Jung, from whom Bachelard drew much of his inspiration, obviously thought the same thing. There is no more reason to read Bachelard's text today than yesterday or tomorrow. This kind of completely in the moment text is just another way of getting rid of time. But there is still a choice to be made. Why water rather than another element? Bachelard did not choose, but dealt with all 4 elements. Fire, water, air and earth were also treated in relation to the material imagination. Each element has given rise to what Bachelard calls its own complexes. Ultimately, this is an analysis of various myths linked to the aqueous element. Among them is the myth of Narcissus, which here takes on a cosmic form. Through water, it is the world that sees and admires itself. The cosmos is indeed in some way touched by narcissism. The world wants to see itself. The will, in its Schopenhauerian aspect, creates eyes to contemplate itself, to revel in beauty. We can see here how Bachelard influenced Maurice Merleau-Ponty, who took up these ideas of fundamental narcissism and associated them with the notion of flesh, that is to say, with the notion of element. Bachelard was to multiply all sorts of myths by associating him with the element of water. And these myths ultimately touch on those fundamental notions of psychoanalysis that are the life drive and the death drive. The Karen complex analyzed in the 3rd chapter of the book deals with the relationship between water and death, and the strange notion of a death that we do not try to avoid, but rather desire. Bachelard said, "Water and death has so far appeared to us as an accepted element. We are now going to group together images in which water and death appears to us as a desired element." Here we move from Caron's complex to Ophelia's. The problem of suicide in reality. But water is not simply a macabre element. It illustrates our finitude. The limits are those of birth and death.